You said that my client has a very Hispanic-looking face. What does that mean?
Means exactly what I said.
Can you explain it to me? I'm confused as to what that means.
You're confused as to what a Hispanic person looks like?
Yeah, is there anybody Hispanic on their Zoom call right now?
Objection one.
Well, I see a lot of boxes.
You got some pictures in front of you. You got gallery view. Is there any Hispanics on the call right now?
Oh my god.
Not one that would jump out to me as a very clearly...
Okay, so to be clear, right now, testifying under oath during his deposition, Steven Crowder is asked, can you please tell me what you mean by very Hispanic looking? And he's like, exactly what it means. I don't know if you know this, but Steven Crowder and Tim Pool are currently being sued by the very same lawyer who in fact successfully sued Alex Jones, and it is once again for spreading misinformation. Tim Pool, unfortunately, has not given a sworn under oath testimony. We'll get into why in a second here. But Steven Crowder is amongst the people who have now testified. We had the recording of his full testimony. I'm not going to watch the full hour and a half of it, but there's some juicy bits to show you, which are kind of funny. If you didn't know the background, basically, there was a mass shooter in the United States who was a neo-Nazi who was inspired by a number of right-wing media figures, was especially inspired by Libs of Chick Talk, higher right check, by the way, and this person was also not white. And so this actually broke the brains of a lot of right-wingers who can't process the world properly, and then suddenly we're like, they can't be a neo-Nazi because not white. Only white person can be neo-Nazi. Only white person can be Nazi. Therefore, not Nazi. It's like, did you know that the person like had a swastika tattoo and SS tattoos? You know, the Waffen SS. This person was a neo-Nazi. Absolutely. Did you know this person had a lot of fucking writings as a neo-Nazi about how they were white supremacists, inspired by other people that they saw as notable white supremacists? People like, say, Nick Fuentes, after watching Nick Fuentes on the Tim Pool show, stuff like that. Well, a lot of people, especially right-wingers, who suddenly were seeing themselves put under a microscope once again that a violent extremist and a Nazi had in fact been ingesting their content and learning some things along the way. So they immediately ran to the whole cover of, but it's not a Nazi. He cannot be Nazi because not white. You see, only white people have the power to be Nazis, not anyone else. And by the way, I keep telling the world this because apparently right-wingers don't know this. Everyone can be racist. Everyone can uphold white supremacy. Everyone can advocate for white supremacy. They don't have to be white. There can be people who happen to have non-white skin, who happen to have a lot of melanin, and they can still be promoting white supremacist ideas, white supremacy, well, you name it. They can be outright proud neo-Nazis. A mass shooter in the United States was just a young black kid who was a neo-Nazi. He had learned how to hate himself, hate the color of his skin. He was a big follower of Candace Owens, as well as a bunch of other right-wing figures who, again, were indoctrinating him into a pathway of hate. He was part of an online community that went into a lot of, incel, alt-right communities, stuff like that, and was learning a lot about white supremacy and stuff of this nature. And yes, went down a horrifying pathway, was taught by neo-Nazi and white supremacist ideology to hate the color of his own skin, and wanted to enact acts of violence. And this is a very real, horrifying reality that we live in. Newsmax host Greg Kelly aired the image of an innocent man for his coverage of a 2023 mass shooting in Texas. New internal emails show what went wrong. Internal company emails and a deposition obtained by the Huffington Post reveal how the right-wing network Newsmax dismissed accurate reports that a mass shooter was a white supremacist and shared an image of a man they incorrectly identified as the killer. Texas man, 37, filed a libel lawsuit against Newsmax and other media organizations in March after an image of him was used in their coverage of May 6, 2023 mass shooting at an outlet mall in Allen, Texas, that depicted him as the shooter. Oh, sorry, this isn't the mass shooter. This is the person who was innocent but actually got framed. Mauricio Garcia. So he's the one who was told by Newsmax and other people that he, in fact, was the shooter. The real gunman was a 33-year-old white supremacist who shared the same first and last name as Garcia. The gunman killed 8 people and wounded 7 others before he was killed in a shootout with the police. But it was the innocent Garcia's image that was used to depict a neo-Nazi killer. This was pretty obvious unforced error, Newsmax news director Chris Wallace wrote in an email after it became clear the network had connected an innocent man to a mass shooting, according to court records. Garcia is being represented by Houston attorney Mark Bankston, Hero, friend of the show, I might add, of Farrar and Ball. Bankston previously represented the parents of a child who died in 2012 school shooting who won a $45 million judgment against conspiracy theorist Alex Jones for lies he spread about it. Entertainment blog Hollywood Unlocked and Televisa Univision, a parent company of the Spanish-language broadcaster Univision, also listed as defendants. Fox News was previously listed as a defendant but was dropped from the lawsuit in June. News site Today News Africa and far-right commentators Tim Pool and Steven Crowder settled with Garcia, Bankston told Huffington Post. So there's one of the reasons why. If you didn't know, Tim Pool basically was the only person who, when Mark was calling up all of these people saying, hi, by the way, I represent this person. We will be suing you for libel. We would like to speak to you. Is there like a testimony you want to give? Every person told the lawyer that their lawyers will speak for them, and then obviously their lawyers contacted their lawyers, which is oftentimes what happens. All right, especially in media, even if they're digital media companies, what's going to happen is there's going to be a law firm or legal team. It could be for class action or whatever it is. If they contact you directly, you can tell them, my attorney will speak on my behalf, which is honestly what any lawyer usually would recommend that you do. Don't deal with this yourself. That's what you pay me money to do. It's my job. I'm going to know way more about it than you will, and I will also prevent you from potentially incriminating yourself or giving away too much information. Let me speak on your behalf. I know what I'm doing. And so that's usually what happens, and in this case, everyone said that. Steven Crowder, all of them were like, my attorneys will reach out to you, and it was lawyer to lawyer. Except for Tim Pool. Tim Pool was the only exception, who apparently, I guess, just thought in his infinite beanie wisdom that he was going to be able to, I guess, handle this fine. So he had just a one-on-one call with Mark. The nature of which, I guess, unfortunately, we'll never know. Because I guess it didn't go too well and he had to settle out of court. So whatever settlement he has already reached, I guess is fair, is something that both parties have agreed to. It's something that he's had to, so that's what happened, essentially. They won't be able to tell us, we'll never know how much, right? This is the whole point of settling these things out of court and doing so between the two lawyers. So obviously Garcia's lawyer, Representative Mark Bankston in this case, reached a settlement with Tim Pool and he paid it, and then that's the end of that. So it's not going to trial. He's totally fine. He didn't have to give a deposition. That's the end of that story. Andrew Brown, the chief operating officer at Newsmax, gave a deposition as part of the lawsuit on August 20th. During it, Brown routinely acknowledged that Newsmax staff failed its internal journalistic practices when reporting on the shooting. Newsmax published an image that we have not verified with the investigators in charge of the shooting, Brown said in the deposition, which you can watch in full here. The deposition, along with court records that include internal emails from Newsmax executives and employees, give a glimpse into the editorial process of a media empire known for its praise of President Donald Trump and its conspiratorial lies about the 2020 election that Trump lost. You can read the emails here. 2 days after the shooting, May 8th, media reports began to trickle in about the shooter's ties to the neo-Nazi movement, including his tattoos of a swastika and the SS lightning bolt of Hitler's paramilitary forces. The shooter also had a Russian social media account rife with hate-filled rants against women and black people, the New York Times reported, and Eric Toller, the former researcher at open source research Bellingcat, independently verified the killer's social media website when the details were posted on X, formerly Twitter. When that all happened, I was at the time, diligently staying to and covering that story, and then was not obviously surprised, but certainly horrified once again to see that this killer, this mass fucking shooter, this horrifying monster, this neo-Nazi, had been indoctrinated by a lot of the very figures that I oftentimes am calling out. People like, say, Nick Fuentes, and he had episodes of the Tim Pool show that he'd been watching some of these white supremacists when they came out to talk about things like white supremacy talk about. The shooter was also a huge fan of Libs of TikTok, Haya Raichek, speaking fondly of her and stuff like that. By the way, Haya Raichek is Jewish. This person is a neo-Nazi who is not white. Like, these things to these neo-Nazis, what's their most coherent ideology is that they are following, yes, they want to uphold white supremacy. They want to attack what they feel as degenerates, people who are, unworthy of existence, such as LGBTQ plus people, such as enemies of the white race or upholding the white race. All that kind of stuff is woven into their hard right fucking ideology. But a lot of the people along the way that they're getting indoctrinated by, they would downplay this shit. Like, Tim Pool went on an entire conspiracy tour after this, being like, this person was not actually a fan of mine. If you look at the video, you'll see that it clearly shows, like, in that video, that he is not a subscriber. He didn't hit subscribe, so you know that he wasn't even a subscriber to my channel. He had just watched a couple episodes where I was bringing on some people who have some perhaps extreme views, but you can't say that I necessarily am in any way directly responsible for this. Following the new details from Toller, prominent right-wing voices, including that of billionaire X and owner Elon Musk, floated conspiracies denying the shooter's neo-Nazi background. Chris Knowles, the vice president of programming at Newsmax, also questioned the shooter's white supremacist background. Knowles sent an email on May 8th to other high-level staff at Newsmax with the subject line, quote, white supremacy. Lots of jumping to conclusions by the media, fueled by Biden's group, constant push with this theory that white supremacy is a bigger danger in the country, Knowles wrote in an email to other executives. So, this is the inside, because you don't normally get to see this stuff, but these are the letters being sent from Newsmax executives to one another. Lots of talks about white supremacy out there, and 2 horrific weekend incidents. In Texas, the Hispanic shooter may have belonged to a dangerous Latino gang called Tango Blast, big in Texas, given the gang symbol's tattoo on his hand. Also in Texas Brownsville, the driver plows into a crowd of illegals, now ID'd as a, quote, Hispanic man. News conference shortly. Lots of jumping to conclusions by the media, fueled by the Biden group constant pushing of this theory that white supremacy is a bigger danger in the country. You can see the spin being done by, again, white supremacists themselves trying to push white supremacist rhetoric, but not as open and proud. And frankly, it's dangerous to just openly do fucking Nazi shit. You can see the kind of the pushback that someone like Elon Musk is getting for that. So for Newsmax, they're just trying now to play fast and loose and behind the scenes be like, just make sure you keep pointing out some key things here. Hispanic. He was Hispanic. He was not white. Non-white. Push that. But what about like the overwhelming amount of evidence that they were say radicalized by white supremacist ideology? The swastikas, for example, that one's pretty, like, swastika tattoos, SS Waffen tattoos. I mean, you could say that these are non-white white supremacists, but you certainly cannot deny that they're not Nazis or neo-Nazis or believe in Nazi ideology, right? Hispanic. They're just, that's what we should report on. Hispanic. Yet another Hispanic man causes a mass act of violence. Is this because of the hatred of white people, or perhaps the disenfranchisement of the white race? You're doing it, Newsmax. You're doing the white supremacist thing. Rather than be like, white supremacists, they're bad people. Nazis are bad people. We here at Newsmax hate Nazis. You're not doing that. Instead, you're like, let's keep vilifying minorities. The very thing that inspire Nazis to commit terrible acts of Nazi violence. We'll keep doing that thing. Hopefully we're not signaling to them. Late that night on Newsmax, Greg Kelly reports the host questioned the shooter's white supremacist background. Kelly was wrong, as authorities would later clarify. Even worse, Kelly aired the photo of the wrong Garcia while making his incorrect point. We didn't know anything for a good long time. A day and a half went by, no information whatsoever, until they told us this guy did it. Marcio Garcia, Kelly said on the show. Next to Kelly was a mugshot of the innocent Garcia with a large graphic titled, White Supremacy, underneath the image. Below that, a title for the segment read, Here we go again with white supremacy. Is it any wonder that people like Steven Crowder, people like Tim Pool were also pushing this narrative, especially someone like Tim Pool, who, woo, it looks pretty bad, Tim Pool. Looks like the guy, the neo-Nazi white supremacist was watching your show. That's bad, right? The fact that maybe there was something about your conversation with Nick Fuentes that resonated enough with him to commit these vile acts of mass violence. But then it's back to, well, I mean, can he really be a white supremacist when he's not white? Can non-white people be racist? Are they capable of it? Do they have the IQs, the craniums, if you will? Are they intelligent enough to even conceive of racism? Or is that something left to the master race? Tune in to Newsmax at 11 when we explore these very important ideas. And you're like, Jesus Christ, you're doing more of it. More of the white supremacy here. Now look, this is not a white supremacist, Kelly said. By the way, we abhor white supremacy. But you know what the left does, right? They think anything MAGA must be a white supremacist. This is appalling. This is all just pathetic. I think if someone has a swastika tattoo and an SS Waffen tattoo, then they're probably a Nazi or love Nazis. Otherwise, why would you put those things on your body forever? That's a pretty strong tell, I mean, you don't really need Elon Musk even to do a double Sieg Heil at that point. You're pretty clear on what your beliefs are if you're going to those extremes. Yeah. On May 7, 2023, I first began to learn about the false accusations made against me in the media. I had spent the next week in total panic. Nobody could calm me down. My physical and mental state completely broke down. As the days passed, the more I learned about the false accusations, the worse it got. Garcia said he couldn't sleep and began to have panic attacks. I also had so much time thinking about the huge number of people across America who believe I committed the worst crime imaginable, being a neo-Nazi murderer in front of children. He added, it really messes with your head to know that millions of people saw your picture and think you're a monster. I just don't think I'll ever be the same after this. By the way, the right does this all the time to trans people, all the time. And the media can't play catch up fast enough if they're posting pictures they found on fucking 4chan or some subreddit, and they're like, the mass shooter has been identified as this trans person, everybody. Well, then fucking what do you think happens to that person's entire life? How it gets thrown up upside down. In this case, it happens to be a person who's completely innocent, who has nothing to do with it, and simply because these racist-ass institutions and all of the fucking other pundit class who never are held accountable unless this happens. This is the good thing about a Mark Bankston and a lawsuit and them going after Alex Jones in the way they did, is because otherwise these people won't stop. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about corrections. They're not fucking ever going to apologize or say they've done something wrong. They just keep spreading lies until someone stops them. That's the thing. They don't give a fuck. You can have them caught in 4K. You can have like fucking Matt Walsh on the Joe Rogan show have that light shine upon him and be like, you are demonstrably lying. You're lying to everyone, your own fans, your own audience. You are raising hysteria to get people mad enough to commit acts of violence. That's what this does. You and Hayaraichik and all these other fucking peddlers, stochastic terrorists that you are, you lie about this until people die. That's what you do. And you keep on going and pushing it until people fucking die, because there are real neo-Nazis who will believe your shit. And some will actually take up guns and do violence. And that's the horrifying reality of it. And then you'll just never correct yourselves. You'll post images and pictures of a completely innocent person and be like, white supremacy? Are we supposed to be mad, apparently, at neo-Nazis and white people when you should stay mad at Hispanics? Look at this, a picture of a Hispanic man. Does he want to kill you all? Does he want to kill all of us? Does he want to get rid of the white race? Well, you should stay mad, everybody. He's seeking more than $1 million in damages. From Ultra MAGA account to Newsmax, the origin of the wrong photos spread across social media and eventually to people's television screens. Appeared from a stem of the account on X, the social media platform that has become a hotbed of misinformation under Musk's leadership. The account's owner has more than 60,000 followers, referred to himself as an Ultra MAGA business owner on the X page. The day after the attack on May 7th, the account posted the wrong photo of Garcia. Huffington Post did not make any example of the photo being used, so the media is stating that Allen, Texas mall shooter was a right-wing white supremacist. Really, the user wrote. The internal investigation by Newsmax researcher John McGrory found the network's blunder, pointed out the conspiracies that began to take shape. I mean, it doesn't help when people like Tim Pool and Steven Crowder spread it too, right? As this photo thread, more from the deposition, when the photo was taken. Backlash was fierce. Didn't matter at that point though. Elliot, let's follow up right away. He needs to know if he did and used the wrong photo. He needs to say that. Their team needs to be very careful on this, obviously. I'll speak to Bill about some simple things to get back to you once they confirm they did, in fact, use the wrong photo. Hi, I was reaching out to see if Newsmax or Greg Kelly had any comments on this segment that evening. They suspected was the shooter. They dismissed the reports of Garcia's neo-Nazi beliefs. They've repeatedly aired the photo of the wrong person. While Wallace appeared to be one of the few who urged caution in the running for the wrong image, a new court filing from the Bankston accuses Wallace of altering his email to the other executives. Interestingly, the original email sent by Wallace to Valenti did not contain the words "and no sourcing." A court filing from the Bankston alleges Wallace added those words when forwarding it to the bosses to make it appear that he said no sourcing to Valenti, which he did not. On the next episode of the Greg Kelly Reports on May 9th, Kelly issued a quick apology. "We've got to clear up something from last night," Kelly said. "At this time last night, we showed a picture of what we thought was the guy involved in the shooting in Allen, Texas. Now, a lot of media organizations showed this picture. Turned out not to be the guy. So we're sorry about that." As he spoke, the on-air graphic read, "Fake news acknowledges its mistakes." You're fake news.
No background. It's my understanding you attended a couple semesters of college.
Correct.
Okay. I think it's fair to say you have no educational background in journalism.
I wouldn't agree.
Okay. Can you explain to me what your educational background in journalism is?
Years of experience?
I'm asking specifically.
This is already great. Oh, I love the deposition, the questioning of a one Steven Crowder. Amazing. By the way, he is currently under oath. I'll have you all know. He certainly could be used in terms of a criminal proceeding if he goes forward and admits to any crimes in the course of this. So he is being grilled. Yes.
We'll move on to your work experience. I'm talking about your education at this point, if you have any educational background in journalism.
Well, I did study media for, as you said, 2 semesters in college.
Okay, so when you were in college for those semesters, part of that included journalism courses.
Part of it included, yes, broadcast.
Okay. You worked for Fox back.
Broadcasting. Excuse me, Stephen. I went to college as well, and I took some film courses in college. That was not my major. I would never for the life of me try and tell people that if I took a single film class, what, were you in fucking studying the works of David Lynch or something? All of a sudden it's like, yeah, so no, I have formal training in journalism. What was your training? Broadcasting. I took a broadcasting course. That's not journalism training. That's not talking about journalistic ethics. That's teaching you what a fucking frame is. That's telling you what a fucking a pulley or using a crossfade is. That's not. It's not teaching you fucking ethics in journalism or how to have journalistic integrity or even the purpose, the philosophy of journalism. That's so fucking rich.
In the 2009-2013 time period.
I believe so. Time period sounds correct.
Did they provide you any training in journalism?
Experience.
I understand that you did the job for many years. I'm sure you picked up some things, right? But what I'm wondering actually is, as part of your employment, did Fox provide you with formal training in journalism?
They did not send me to journalism school, no.
Okay. Now at that time, I think it's fair to say that your what you were doing for Fox was primarily concentrated on more comedic type presentations. Is that fair?
No.
So back during the time period when you were working at Fox, would you say you were covering hard news at that point too?
Objection form.
Sometimes.
Okay. And then after leaving Fox, let's start this way. The YouTube channel you had that while you were at Fox, right?
Correct.
And you've kept using that as a platform ever since leaving Fox, right?
Yes.
Am I right that there was a brief period where you weren't on YouTube? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Objection form.
How so?
Or am I right that at some point you either stopped posting to YouTube or were in some way punished by YouTube? Did anything like that happen?
Objection form.
Well, there are temporary suspensions that happen on YouTube, if that's what you mean.
Okay, but in May 2023, you were posting regularly on YouTube?
I believe so.
Okay, so for instance, the coverage we're here to talk about today, that would have appeared on YouTube?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, ever since leaving Fox, say the past 10 years, fair to say that you've begun to amass a rather sizable audience?
Yes.
Okay. You understand that as the size of your audience increased, the magnitude of potential harm that could be caused by publishing a false statement about someone also increased?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that as that potential magnitude for harm increased and your audience increased, your responsibility as a journalist also increased?
Objection form.
Well, I've never labeled myself a journalist, but yes.
I mean, well, you cover hard news. We can agree with that.
Sure. So does Jon Stewart.
Sure, absolutely. Right. And let's make it clear, even today, on your show, in which you cover hard news, you also do things that are comedic.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you would agree with me, for instance, that the sort of care that a person like you needs to show might be different if you're just, say, talking with a friend at a bar versus making an announcement over a baseball stadium public address system. You understand what I mean?
I understand.
Okay. And so when making decisions about how you run your business, I take it one of the things you do consider is the responsibility you have given the size of your audience. Is that right?
Well, I take responsibility regardless of the size of the audience.
Sure, I understand that perhaps even when just talking to a neighbor or a friend at a bar, you might be careful about what you say. But what I'm asking is, when you do your job, part of what you consider in how you create your policies, your requirements, et cetera, is you understand you're going to be talking to a very large audience and that the magnitude of harm from false information could be very great. Is that correct?
There's a lot in that statement. We take care to be as responsible as possible, regardless of the size of the audience.
Okay. Last year, when doing an episode of Louder of Crowder, how many people could you reasonably expect to view it?
I don't know.
So does your, for instance, on YouTube, YouTube tracks the number of views your videos get, right?
To a degree, yes.
Okay. Rumble does the same thing. You can see how many people viewed your videos?
To a degree, yes.
Okay. And so that should give you, the number of views on Rumble and YouTube will at least give you a minimum baseline of who saw the video. Is that right?
Sounds right.
And then you also know that your materials will quite foreseeably spread via social media, right?
It's so slimy.
Sure.
You're aware people share your videos.
Sure, yes.
For instance, when getting a video in this case, when I asked for a copy of the video in this case, I was directed to a website that publishes your videos without any of your input, right?
That's my understanding.
Okay. One of the things you offer your audience is fact checking of the news, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In fact, let's bring up tab 1. All right, I want to show you something that was just posted to the website last week. And as I think you may remember, we had this deposition scheduled for a few days ago. But one of the reasons that we had rescheduled it is so that you could do fact checking at the DNC, correct?
Yeah, it's a portion of it, yes.
I love when there's like criminal proceedings and then you get to see some of these fucking people's work up on screen. Like the same thing when it was like Alex Jones, and then it's like each day Alex Jones was making more material that could be admissible in court for the following day of his proceedings. Like we now like to submit into evidence the show he recorded last night.
Okay, so for instance, in this broadcast, you'd be telling your audience, hey, certain claims are going to be made at the DNC, and we are going to use our skills to tell you what is real and what is not. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So your audience can expect that you're going to be talking to them about matters of truth or falsity, right?
Yes.
Do you agree it's reasonable for your audience to expect you to use the same level of care that they would expect from any commercial media outlet?
Objection form.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is
Said yes.
It's not going to be your position that, hey, I'm just a clown, I'm just a guy who plays dress up, I'm not doing news. That's not what your position is. You do hard news, correct?
It depends on the context.
Absolutely, sure. Like we said, there are some instances where your audience is clearly going to know that you're doing a comedic sketch, right?
Sure.
But your May 8th coverage of the Allen shooting, that wasn't a comedy sketch.
I don't know if it included sketch elements. We often mix news with sketch elements, but no, not the commentary and the reporting, no.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about how things work at your business.
Good setup.
First of all, you're the boss at Louder with Crowder, right?
Objection form.
I guess.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing what I'm asking is, if you're doing things throughout your workday, is there somebody who can come to you and says, Stephen, no, you can't cover that. You're not allowed to do that.
Yes.
Okay, who would that person be?
There going to be a multitude of people.
So there are a multitude of people at Louder with Crowder who have veto power over what you can cover on your show.
Not a multitude of people who have, wise counsel.
Sure, I have a lot of people in my life who have wise counsel. I listen to them and take their thoughts into consideration, but they don't have control over me. And I'm wondering if there's anybody at Louder with Crowder who has control over you, who says, if you do this, Stephen, you're fired. You don't work here anymore.
At Louder with Crowder? No, no one can fire me.
Okay. And if you want to say something on your show, is there anybody who can stop you?
On my show?
I'm not in any way a lawyer, but I do like appreciate how Mark can set everything up. And so like, it's like, you're just basically, you've got a list of things you need to establish, right? Like we've established that he, in fact, while he does comedy sketches and can do comedic reporting, he does do what he considers to be factual reporting on the news. And in that sense, he treats himself as the same way and has the same standards that you would expect from a person who does, say, journalism or news. It takes a very long time to get there. And then you move on to, all right, so are you the one who's in charge? Like you essentially just want to be like, do you make all the calls at Louder with Crowder? Was this your fault? Did you make the decision to do this? But you can't just outright do that. You have to establish, does anyone have the power above you to say, control the narrative, the editorialism, blah, 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 for him to actually be like, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. So I am the head honcho. Was that the question? Was that you were trying to get to?
No.
Okay. You would agree that it would be the usual practice of Louder with Crowder. Let me put it in an easier way. You agree it's your usual practice to verify the accuracy of images you share with your audience.
Objection form.
Can you restate the question? It was telling
Yeah,
me.
sure. If you're going to share images with your audience of news events, right, things that depict news events, it's your usual practice to verify the accuracy of those images before you show them.
Objection form.
Sometimes.
Okay, let's make it more specific. When you're going to share an image of a purported mass murder, it would be your usual practice to verify the accuracy of that image before showing it.
Objection form. And to clarify, Mark, just so for reference, are you referring to Stephen individually or Louder with Crowder as a whole?
Him individually.
Go ahead.
Me individually? Then no.
No. So there are, in other words, let's put it this way. If you're going to use on May 8th an image, you're going to show your audience an image of who is purportedly the mass murderer. Is that something you're going to see before you go air? Or is this like a Ron Burgundy situation where you're seeing it for the first time?
I appreciate the reference to Ron Burgundy. Based on Jim Walcott, actually, Canadian sitcom. There's a difference between...
Sir, you're in a trial. This is a trial right now. You're giving a deposition. Yeah. So, all right. Well, do we need to strike that from the record? We don't. Okay. All right. Well, that is part of it.
Breaking news, for example, something exclusive to us, where there's a obviously very strict, much more strict process of due diligence. If we are the news, then there's reporting on the news that is available publicly, or reporting on someone else's report. So to answer your question, we would obviously ensure that the reporting on that person's reporting is accurate, meaning the original source would be the reporter.
Okay. So in terms of sharing an image, right? I believe what I'm hearing is that if it is your original reporting, you would have a higher level of care than when you are repeating someone else's reporting. Is that fair?
No, what I'm saying is that there's a difference between breaking news being the subject of news and reporting on someone else's news. So use your example like the DNC. That's their story. They run images or claims. So we report on what they are running.
All right, let me give you an example. If the DNC puts up an image, right, and says, here is, let me give you an example. Says the DNC puts up an image of Mount Rushmore and says, this is the Washington Monument, right? You would.
That would be the process.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit because I think what he's doing so far is just establishing a lot.
That's what they were.
All right, I'm going to show you an excerpt that I want to ask you some questions about from your May 8th show. So let's play that now.
Who the shooter was first. Okay. So you're gonna hear the media give you some reports. A lot of what they say is bullshit. All right. Shooter was a 33-year-old Hispanic male. His name was Mauricio Garcia. Mauricio Garcia. Now, the reason that we are pulling this, and you're asking yourself because we make the references available, we're pulling this from Today News Africa, is because it's the only news outfit showing you the shooter's face. You won't find his face in, here you go, NBC, Wall Street Journal, CNN, CBS, Washington Post. They want to tell you that he was a white supremacist, yes, and not...
This is so funny. This is in hindsight at a fucking court case because like you're sitting there in the corner watching yourself be demonstrably wrong, thinking you're pwning the fucking mainstream media in the segment. Like in the segment, he's just sitting there and he's like, none of the real media will tell you the truth, but we got it. Yeah, we're the only ones that will show you the picture. This one, it comes from a real source. And then like turns out that they were actually doing something called due diligence. Yeah, journalistic integrity. They were making sure that they wouldn't wind up in a court trial like you are right now, having to look at the video footage of you slamming the fucking mainstream media right now.
See his very Hispanic looking face.
Right. And a second ago, I actually signaled you because CNN had that lower kind of chyron that said basically that this person was influenced by white supremacy. That's the headline that they're running with right now, over.
Yeah.
To make sure they drill it in.
Okay, my first question is, in the lead up to that show, you had been reviewing a lot of media coverage about the shooting.
Objection 4.
Yes.
Okay. And that review of the media coverage showed that Today News Africa was the only news outfit reporting to show a picture of the shooter's face. Correct?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. That review of media coverage, that showed that Today News Africa was the only news outfit purported to show the shooter's face.
No.
Okay, so when you said we're pulling this from Today News Africa, it's because it's the only news outfit showing you the shooter's face. That wasn't accurate.
Sorry, what was the last part of that question?
That wasn't accurate, what you said in the video.
You, Steven, it's you. He's like, so you were watching yourself in the clip, so he's quoting you back to you and now saying, is this accurate, what you said at the time? No, that would not be accurate. That is falsifiable. Oh wait, that's me.
I was saying was it was the only place currently with an article including the image of the shooter. Yeah. Okay. That moment, as I believe it.
Right, so when you were making that broadcast, your review of media had shown you that Today News Africa was the only news outfit doing that, showing a purported picture of the shooter's face.
No.
Okay. I'm a little confused because I thought what you had just said was that at that time, that's why you said that it's the only news outfit showing you the shooter's face. Is that right or is that not right?
No, it was the only place at that moment in time with an active article, including that image. Of course, there are many other places that are created or social media. So at that moment in time, because that was a White House press credentialed reporter.
Well, no, that's all I'm asking about is that moment in time. And that they're the only news outfit purporting to show the shooter's face. We can agree with that.
I don't.
Can you tell me the news outfits that at that moment in time were showing the shooter's face?
No, it'd be difficult to remember. It was everywhere on social media and different articles. So.
Well, look, I understand it was on social media. Social media are not media outfits, right? Just some random person on social media is not a media outfit, correct?
No, I disagree.
Okay, so if you just came across a random account, they, Ultra MAGA guy 567, and you saw the picture there, you'd say, well, look, that's a media outlet publishing this photo. Is that right?
No.
Okay. So as far as any other news outlets that were showing you the shooter's face, right now you can't think of any, right?
You so close. A swing and a miss, Steven. Yeah, I guess you're totally right.
I don't remember which one's not at that point.
All right.
I remember that one because it was a credentialed reporter.
So what I'm really trying to get to is this line from the show. We're pulling this from Today News Africa. It's because it's the only news outfit showing you the shooter's face. Is that statement true or false at that moment in time?
Could have been poorly worded.
All right. So there are other news outfits showing the shooter's face at this point in time.
Objection 4.
I believe there were.
Okay. You just don't know what they are, right?
Not at this moment, no.
I can't imagine they played a big role in your decision to use this photo then, right?
Objection 4.
They could have.
I mean, you can't testify to that today. You have no idea what they are, right?
Objection 4.
They could have. I couldn't testify to, for example, fact checks of the DNC when one primary source is used other corroborating sources because I don't remember if we check it once or twice with another source. We provide usually one.
Okay.
So it's of equal importance to have other people who do.
What do you mean by that? It's of equal importance to have other people that do. What does that mean?
Meaning whether it's social media, whether it's other news outlets, there are several sources that we'll often check, but one is made available. So if CNN makes a claim and we check it and then we see that Washington Post makes the same claim, well, in the reference, CNN may be the one that we referenced, but Washington Post was very valuable in ensuring that CNN wasn't the only one making that claim.
Sure, but as we discussed, all sources are not equal, right?
Sure, not all sources are equal, I would agree.
Okay, so we don't know. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what reasonable basis did you have to believe that this photo was being published or was accurate? And so far I'm hearing Today News Africa, and I'm not sure if I'm hearing anything else.
Oh, no, that's not the reason I believe it was accurate. I believe that everything else mentioned in the clip you even just showed was correct. As far as the age, as far as the weapons used, and most importantly, the African-American officer, the black officer who took out said shooter, which wasn't being covered, and the media coverage of it. And then there was the image that was incorrect, but all that other information was correct.
Right, but I'm here because my client was misidentified, right? I don't care too much about this African-American police officer or whatever, right? Like, I'm trying to figure out, I mean, the whole point of me having you here today is to try to figure out, did you have any basis to think this thing was real in terms of this picture, in terms of this picture? All right, and I'm here in Today's News Africa. Can you tell me any other reason you had to think that it was real?
All the other, no, what I'm saying is that all the other reporting information was correct, and a White House press credentialed reporter also included an image. Everything else reported was correct. The image was incorrect from the White House press credentialed reporter.
All right, put a pin in that. We're going to come back and talk to you about that. I promise we're going to talk about this reporter and White House credentials and all of that. So make sure to remember that. I want to ask you though, in the video, you said you won't find his face in NBC, Wall Street Journal, CNN, CBS, Washington Post. They want to tell you that he was a white supremacist and not see his very Hispanic looking face. Do you remember seeing that in the video?
Yes.
All right, so we can agree that you told your viewers that mainstream media outlets were hiding the picture from the public for nefarious political reasons.
Objection 4.
Which picture?
The picture you were displaying from Today News
No,
Africa.
no, I don't agree.
Okay. So when you said that you won't find his face in those outlets, and they want to tell you that he was a white supremacist and not see his very Hispanic-looking face, you're saying that's a choice they made, right? These media outlets made a choice.
To include no image verification, yes.
To include no images of the shooter, right?
Right.
Right. And the
Well, also,
reason
you're
that they
specifically
didn't
saying
include
that-
pictures of the shooter. The reason you had to
Like,
get it from Today News Africa.
Why would you have to
is because they didn't want
specify
the
his
public to
very
see the shooter.
Hispanic-looking
That was what you were
face?
telling your audience.
Objection 4.
No.
I'm having trouble reconciling what you're saying now with what you said in the video, because you said straight up that they don't want you to see his very Hispanic-looking face. So that we can say the media outlets made a decision for political reasons to say that he was a white supremacist, that they did not want to show his face. Right? That's what you were telling your audience.
To show any images, sure, yeah.
Right, and you had an image, right? You had one that you think they should have shown.
Objection 4.
No, I believe they should have shown any image, including the footage of including the misidentifying of the black officer. At that moment in time, there was a push for gun control and a white supremacist shooter. At the time, we were told that was the greatest domestic terror threat, and it was an editorial decision to not include a litany of information as it related to the shooting in total, including a Hispanic shooter who was simply labeled a white supremacist.
I want to talk about
Who was also a white
that existed for you on
supremacist?
May 8th. Right?
What's
One
important to me is the guns. They were coming for our
major
weapons.
media organizations made a decision that they were not going to show any pictures of the shooter's face. And they were doing that because they wanted to press a story about white supremacy. And a second possibility is that those news organizations were either unable to confirm the accuracy of a photo, or they had already determined that the photo that you were showing was false. Right? You understand those two possibilities?
No.
I'm not saying you agree with them. I'm understanding you understand that those are two possibilities that
No,
exist.
the second one is not possible.
It is not possible that the news organizations you were referring to were either unable to confirm the accuracy of the photo or had already determined it was false. You're saying that's impossible.
You just said had determined the image I showed was false.
Correct.
They would not have been able to do that because I was reporting on their reporting. So they wouldn't have been able to report on my image being false or confirm it because their stories were already out there.
Wasn't your image though, right?
Beg your pardon?
We just talked about you didn't break it.
It
So when you
was-
say my image, they wouldn't. The second possibility, definitively using that they determined my image was false. I was
The image you used.
reported. So that would
The image you
Let's
stole,
rephrase that, 'cause
though.
I'm just saying the image you used. All right. Let's take the image you used and divorce it from your production. Right. That is a physical image that existed out there in the world. Right.
that image, yes.
Yes. It is totally possible that the reason the media wasn't printing any pictures of the shooter is because they've been unable to confirm the authenticity of any picture, or they had already confirmed that that picture
That's
was
100% what it
that
is, by
picture
the
of
way.
my client. They had already determined it was false. That's possible.
It's possible.
Now, of the two possibilities, you have one where the media intentionally doesn't want to show the picture for political reasons, or two, they've simply been unable to confirm a picture. The second possibility is more likely. You'll agree to that?
Objection 4.
No, I don't agree.
All right.
Of course he
really
doesn't.
think it's rational
It's basically
to think
admitting
that
to
the Wall
everything,
Street Journal, of all
even
places,
though it sounds
made a
ridiculous when it's all
decision
laid out like that.
to not show the shooter's face so that they could push a narrative about white supremacy.
Yes.
The
Yeah,
Wall
worth a
Street Journal
try.
that's owned by News
Yeah,
Corp
great
and
takeaway.
Rupert Murdoch, that same Wall Street Journal was intentionally deciding not to show the shooter's face for a political reason. That was rational for you.
That same Wall Street Journal, I believe it's rational.
All right. Now, as you said in the video, you acquired the photo from something called Today News Africa, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Where did Today News Africa source the photo from?
Objection form.
I don't remember at this moment in time.
Did they say in their reporting?
I don't remember at this moment.
It'd be important to learn that information, right?
If you were doing a story on it,
They're
maybe.
reporting. It's important to report accurately on this person's reporting.
Right. So if Today's News Africa had a primary source, that would be useful information to know.
That would be useful.
And if they didn't have any kind of primary source, they had no sourcing whatsoever, that should have been a red flag for you that you couldn't verify the image, right?
Objection form.
Could be.
You had mentioned earlier that, okay, so first of all, on May 8th, had you ever heard of Today News Africa?
Yes.
Okay. You were familiar with this individual, Simon Ateba?
I don't remember.
Okay. That, to help refresh your memory, that's the person I believe you referred to as a White House credentialed reporter.
I believe so.
Okay. What credentials, White House credentials, did he have?
Objection form.
I don't know which credentials he had. I know that he was listed as a White House credentialed. I don't know if it was a member of the press corps. There are different kinds of credentials, but that was my understanding.
I mean, how'd you gain this understanding?
Objection form.
I don't remember. At that point in time, there would have been people who verified that and told me that was the case.
Okay. Do you think he had any credentials that were any different than any member of the public who applies to access the White House grounds?
I love when they have to try and explain the
That any
lies
member
they
of the
do every
public,
day
or
on
then
the show.
members of the public who are allowed to access the White House grounds.
Right. Do you know what a hard pass is to the White House?
A hard pass?
A hard pass. Yeah.
No.
Okay. You understand that any member of the public can apply to the Secret Service to get a pass to enter White House grounds. Did you know that?
I know people can enter a process, sure.
Okay. Do you have any reason to think that he had any different credentials than just getting a hard pass?
With the information at the time, I did.
Okay.
Uh.
And do you have any reason to believe that, well, for instance, like, did you think he was a member of the White House Correspondents Association?
Objection form.
I don't recall at this time.
Okay. There are a lot of media organizations who have something that they call White House correspondent, right?
Correct.
There are even organizations that have people who belong to things called press galleries. They have credentials from a press gallery. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you think that Mr. Ateba had credentials from a press gallery?
Objection form.
I don't recall at this time.
Okay. So in terms of, let me ask you this, in terms of why you believed, well, let me stop because I'm making an assumption. Did you believe that Today News Africa was a credible and reliable news source?
It's my recollection that at that moment in time, I was informed that it was.
Okay. And why did you believe that?
Objection form.
No, I'd be guessing. I would assume because there were other places that were including that image at the time, and people on my staff said that it was.
There were, let's first start with the first part. There were other places using that image at the time. Sitting here today, you can't name any of those, right?
I can't remember unless I go through perhaps your suit. I believe you include some.
There's definitely some. You definitely have co-defendants, right?
So
Who have done it
great
on
defense.
very.
Yeah, your
I'm
lawsuit.
sure none of these people. You
My
understand where
source is the
lawyers in this room
lawsuit
from,
against me.
Univision and Newsmax, and for Mr. Schroyer, none of those. You didn't rely or see on any of their reporting to do your reporting.
Objection form.
They would have been included. Did you?
Well, some of them occurred after your reporting, so that wouldn't have been them, right?
The ones that occurred before, as you just mentioned.
Right. Do you know any of those?
Objection form.
I would have to go through your suit.
I think we can assume, let me take a publication, I'll take one out of thin air. I think we can assume that you would find a publication like Huffington Post to be frequently unreliable. Am I right in that?
No.
Can you give me an example of a media outlet
Oh.
that you would believe that is not sufficiently
way,
reliable enough for you to use the word reliable?
He's already kind of fallen from grace just from, all the accusations of, sexually assaulting his own male and female employees and exposing himself and stuff like that. So he's not exactly like the #1 voice in right-wing anything. But still, if there are testimonies being given by a lot of these creeps where they're directly contradicting what they talk about every day on their show, exposing their hypocrisy like there is with Alex Jones, like when you get down to the meat of it, there's an endless amount of clips where all the things Alex Jones says all day into a camera for, again, just scares audience and sell his pills. He doesn't believe any of them. Same thing can be said right there. There's a moment where, like, if you talk to Steven Crowder of the Crowder, Louder with Crowder show, is the Huffington Post a good source or a reliable source of information or news? Would he tell you like, oh yeah, for sure, we love them, or would it be like, no, those are cucks, they're for that's the liberal tears, like it's obvious that these people are obviously like he's on testimony now though. That's not what he actually thinks.
Reliable for them.
Sorry, can you reframe? Can you?
Yeah, sure. I'm looking for a media organization you don't find to be generally credible. That you would say, hey, these people are frequently enough unreliable that I don't think they should be relied on for the state of fact. Do you know a media organization like that?
Well, the issue is there can be many different news outlets that are reliable at that moment in time, especially if it's original reporting. And that's why multiple sources are often included. Huffington Post, I would say, is reliably opinion presented, obviously leaning left. As far as unreliable, anyone can be unreliable, make mistakes, and they can be reliable in other instances.
Right, but we talked about how not all sources are equal. Some sources are well more reliable than others, right?
Sometimes.
Okay. So let's take, for instance, let's take Huffington Post. Huffington Post has a White House correspondent. You understand that?
If you say so.
Okay. That fact, the fact that they have a White House correspondent, that doesn't make them reliable, does it?
It would be something taken into consideration.
I would tend to imagine that you would find the majority of White House correspondents to be generally unreliable. Is that not true?
I would generally disagree with many of them.
Well, I mean, you tell your audience on a pretty regular basis that various mainstream organizations are lying to them, right?
That's correct.
Not just unreliable, not just makes mistakes, actively lies to them. You've told your audience that many times about mainstream media.
And there is a difference, yes.
And so, say you got a mainstream media organization, one that you've criticized for lying in the past. It wouldn't follow for you to consider that organization to be generally reliable, would it?
No, that's incorrect.
Can you reconcile for me how, I mean, look, we're talking about the bad old MSM, the ones who lie all the time. Can you reconcile to me your position publicly that these organizations are filled with politicized liars with the idea that, no, actually, they're generally reliable?
I didn't say they were generally reliable.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure of.
I said I wouldn't write them off as unreliable.
Right.
There are people who I disagree with politically, tremendously, who have outright lied in some instances, and then have done original reporting in other instances.
And so you know to do your own due diligence when you're dealing with that kind of media outlet, right?
Objection form. Go ahead.
Yeah. With any media outlet, but I wouldn't write off one as completely unreliable or one as completely reliable. That's what I make available.
And why it's important to do your own due diligence, correct?
And why I think it's most important to make your references publicly available.
All right. In order for the image to be shown on your show that day, again, we talked about it. It wasn't the you when you're broadcasting on the show as you're saying it. That's not the first time you see that image. You saw it before you went on the show.
Yes.
And you would have to, in order for the image to be shown on the show, you would have to approve its use.
Objection form.
Yes.
Okay. And once you use the image and approve it, were other Louder with Crowder staff members permitted to use that image, or would they have to take some additional steps before they could use the image?
They would be able to use it.
Okay. Before you decided to use our client's image, did you know if you were looking at the original image?
What do you mean?
If the image that you were looking at was the original image, or if it had been somebody else's edited image, if it had been cropped, changed, manipulated, anything like that.
I don't recall at this time. That would have been a process with staff with any image.
Did you know who took the original image?
I don't recall at this time.
Did you know when the photo was taken?
I don't recall at this time. That's why I referenced the person who had included that image.
Did you know where the photo was taken?
I don't recall at this time.
Did you at least know why the photo was taken?
Again, I don't recall at this time.
Okay. Well, we know we're looking at a booking photograph, right?
Beg your pardon?
We know we're looking at a booking, the photo that you used in my client, we know we're looking at a booking photograph.
A booking photograph?
Correct.
You mean do you mean a mugshot?
Correct.
Well, I don't know that we know that right now, but that was the reporting from sources at that time.
Let's put it this way. That's the information you had at that time.
That's the information that was being reported at that time.
All right. Considering it was in other words, if the information you relied on is, hey, I'm looking at a mugshot, I'm looking at a booking photograph. Let me go back. Let me actually scratch that question. You knew the shooter wasn't arrested for the shooting, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you knew that from law enforcement on their announcement of his name and age and details that he had no criminal history, right?
Yes.
That the shooter had no criminal history?
Right.
The shooter was killed in Allen?
Correct.
I don't recall that at this time that he had no criminal history.
Would it be the normal practice of your show when covering an event like this to keep up with the announcements from DPS and City Allen Police, the law enforcement officials?
Do you mean information research?
I don't know that specific instance in time. I would imagine there'd be an aggregation of sources.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this: if you had,
that's where we got the footage. I don't know where we got the footage of the officer who, shot the shooter.
Sure. Okay.
But again, I don't remember.
Assume for me that you had taken the efforts to find out about the details of the shooter, right? That he was Mauricio Garcia, 33 years of age, Dallas, Texas, no criminal history. If you had known that information, you would have known the image that you were looking at, this mugshot, was not the shooter, right?
No.
All right, well, let me try to walk you through the logic of this. I'm going to go ahead and assume for me that you knew right? And I don't know if you did. I don't know if you did or you did not look
Really
at
got
this
to
or
hold
whatever.
his
I'm not
hand
making
through
that
this
assumption.
whole thing.
But if you did know the shooter had no criminal history and you knew he wasn't arrested for the shooting, you knew that mugshot wasn't a picture of the shooter, right? That if you had known that information, you would have reached that conclusion.
No.
Can you explain to me how a person with no criminal history and no arrest for the shooting, how they would have a mugshot?
You were the one who said we are under the assumption that it's a mugshot. I know that
Right,
that
that's what
moment,
we've been-
Mauricio, I just want to make sure I'm understanding Mauricio, because obviously it's a little complicated. You just mentioned Mauricio Garcia, 33 years old, right? Dallas, Texas area, Hispanic. That information is accurate, to my understanding.
Yes, all that's accurate.
Okay. And the image was not.
Right, the image is Mauricio Garcia, 36 years old in Dallas. Right, I understand that.
It's a completely
What I'm
different
asking
person.
you is something a little different. Is that if you knew, if the information you were being reported is, hey, this mugshot is the shooter, but if you had known he had no criminal history and wasn't arrested for the shooting, you should have concluded based on that information that that's not the shooter. Is that fair?
No, I disagree.
Okay. Again, can you try to explain to me how somebody who has no criminal history and was not arrested for the shooting, how they would have a booking photograph?
I was reporting on the reported information that include the other information, which we both just agreed was accurate, and image. I don't remember the rest of the details.
I'm not asking any of that, though, right? I'm asking a very simple question.
Mhm.
Is if you had known, in fact, let's go ahead and take this completely away from the alley shooting and treat this as a hypothetical, all right? You have an individual you're trying to identify and match with a picture, all right? And you have two pieces of information. On one, you have somebody reporting, hey, this mugshot is the shooter. And then the other piece of information you have is that person has no criminal history and that person was not arrested for the event. If you know those two pieces of information, you should know that the first piece of information, that mugshot, is not the shooter, right?
Right?
It's a hypothetical question. I don't know that the researchers at that moment in time knew that. I don't know that that was included in the original reporting. And that's why we made sure to list the original reporting reported on their reporting. I don't know that information was known.
I'm sitting here, I'm telling you right now, I don't think you or your people did know that. I don't think so. I have positions about whether I think you should have known that. But what I'm asking is, if you did know the shooter had no criminal history, and you did know that the shooter was not arrested at the scene, then you would have known that a mugshot was not the shooter, or at least would have raised serious doubts about whether that was the correct image.
Yeah, no shit.
Right?
If one did know that there was no criminal history,
Mhm.
if one knew that there had never been any type of image taken in police,
Fucking what the hell is he doing? Starting to speak like he who has no name. If one did know at the time that one could never have known truly if the shooter was in fact the same person. Like, you can just see how much they squirm too, right? Like, this has been 3/4 of squirming. Not ever like directly being like yes, no. It's just like, well, I don't know for the time.
Clean up your room.
It's hard to say. You're not being very clear about that. I need to like rephrase this. I need to put it in a different way. You know what's fucked up about this, by the way, is like, it would have been the easiest thing in the world. Say I had done like a show, and then like midway through the show, any of you who are watching right now, you just put in the chat, Lance, the picture of the person on screen is not the person who just committed a mass fucking murder. Take that off screen, Lance. You should probably take that picture of the guy off screen right now. That's not the mass murderer. And then I'd be like, wait, are you serious? I would click on the link that you provided. I can look at it off screen while we're here live, but I can do it. I can do it live. This is my job. And then all of a sudden be like, oh shit. Realized that I had put the photo of someone who was not the mass murderer up on screen during a time of heightened tension while there's a lot of debate surrounding whether or not this person was in fact a neo-Nazi, even though they were not in fact white. Yes, non-white neo-Nazis exist. Let's move on to the next topic. That's bad. You should correct yourself. You should immediately, at the very least, be like, holy fuck, I just fucked up, everybody. I'm going to erase the VOD, or I'm going to take the episode down, or I'm like, that was really irresponsible on my part. I can't believe I've done that. You wouldn't just be like, fuck off. And then the next day, like, not issue a correction or do anything until people are like, hey, by the way, that was the photo of someone completely different that you just said was a mass murdering fucking racist Nazi. You realize why that's very dangerous and bad to use your massive platform with to lie about someone else who did that shit. And a lot of these scum do it, by the way. You know, they'll just spread a falsifiable rumor about someone else and just walk away and be like, ah, fuck off. And they don't want to be corrected or admit that they were wrong or do anything about it unless you hold them accountable. That's why these lawsuits, I'm sorry, that this is what it's coming down to. You need people like Mark Bankston and people like the Sandy Hook, you know, parents who are willing to take the time out of their day to sue these fuckers into oblivion, because they're never going to stop. They don't listen. They don't take your advice. They sit there. Yeah, it's the Texas Mall shooter. Essentially, the Texas Mall shooter, where there was ample evidence, especially when their social media got revealed, that they, in fact, were a neo-Nazi. They had been indoctrinated by far-right figures online. They praised libs of TikTok. They were horrifying. All that shit. All of their social media got leaked, and it was very, very thorough. Immediately, people like Tim Pool, Steven Crowder, all these fucks, they didn't want that narrative to be true. Newsmax as well. So they started spreading this idea that, hey, by the way, this maybe was a neo-Nazi, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to call someone a neo-Nazi if they in fact are not white. They weren't, how can they be a white supremacist if they're non-white? Do they hate themselves? Let's see the squirm.
The time is 2:53 p.m. We're back on the record.
I ask you about something you said.
Also,
during the
I
show.
can't read what this says.
You had kind of started your segment there about the shooter's identity by
Blitzen
saying
canister
who the shooter
ammunition
was.
sticks to
A lot of what
walls
the
and
media is
enemies.
telling you is bullshit. Do you remember saying that?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you showed it to me.
What was bullshit about it?
Well, if I recall, in the context of that, when we ran clips or segments to this effect, was the white supremacist mass shooter, and then, of course, the aggressive push for gun control. And that the media had initially just covered it as a white supremacist mass shooter, and then didn't go back to it, which was a pattern.
What do you mean didn't go back to it? What does that mean?
Didn't go back to the story that they said they would be reporting on once new information had come out, and instead pivoted to the gun control measures. And I believe that we were pointing out at that point that the black officer used what would be described as an assault weapon.
So are you saying that they abandoned the idea that the shooter was a white supremacist?
I'm saying that the coverage was significantly less afterward.
After what?
After the name and information on the shooter was available.
Well, the name was available well before you did your broadcast, right?
Sure.
Like the media, in other words, when the media was calling this person a white supremacist, this narrative that they allegedly abandoned, it was known that the shooter was a Hispanic man.
Well, I didn't say they allegedly abandoned that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting really confused by some of your answers today, and I apologize for that. Because what I believe that I had heard is that they shifted the story away from this white supremacy stuff once new information came out.
No, they shifted away from the wall-to-wall coverage altogether.
Wall-to-wall coverage of the shooting, or the coverage that he was a white supremacist?
Of the event altogether, yes.
Okay, so
initial coverage was white supremacist mass shooting.
Uh-huh.
And then when the story was Hispanic male mass shooter taken out by black officer with, I believe, an AR-15 or something equivalent, the story was not covered with the same zeal. And I believe that's the point that we were addressing. Contextual.
I'm not understanding.
Oof, that's a one hell of a fucking lie to push out there. Also, wild. Do you see, like, I told you, he's got fucking Nazi white supremacist brain, so his whole shit has to see the world through that lens. So you can see how the gears immediately were just going like that. It's like, well, actually, the narrative changed as soon as we realized that this, in fact, was a Hispanic man who had been taken out by a black police officer, so this couldn't have possibly been a neo-Nazi white supremacist. Like, it's like, oh my god, it just seems so fucking tiring. Why can't you just be like, white supremacy's bad? Easy. There you go. Not like all the other shit. You're just piling justification upon justification upon justification. I'm not actually a racist. I just care deeply about the rates of, inner city crime. I'm not a racist. I just care deeply about who exactly is going to be flying my plane at any given time, and were they hired out of merit, or were they hired simply because of the color of their skin, which could result in me having the plane crash. But I'm not a racist. I just think these things, and I just think these things out loud and tell other people to think them, and get other people who might be white, sometimes not white, to get really mad about this shit, and then everyone gets really mad together, but definitely not a white supremacist, you know?
Understanding though, from the day of the shooting, well, or at least the day after, at least since May 7th, we all knew it was a Hispanic mass shooter, right?
I believe you're correct the day after, yes.
And so when the media was pushing this story about that, law enforcement sources were saying that he was a white supremacist, they did that knowing he was Hispanic.
Not initially.
I don't understand, Mr. Crowder. We knew his name was. We knew,
The day
his name
Let him talk.
we knew on May 7th, before your reporting,
Let him talk.
a full day before your reporting. The
Yeah,
whole
let him
world knew
talk.
that this was Mauricio Garcia, a Hispanic mass shooter, right?
That's what we reported that day, yes. I believe your memory is correct. It was the day after the shooting that
Right.
information came out, right? Yes.
Right. And then the day after that is when you did your reporting.
Right.
So we already knew he was Hispanic. That didn't change. Nothing changed in terms of his identity.
I did, because I believe the information became available after I believe what you showed me was a Monday.
I'll take your word for it.
I think that was the clip that you just shown. So if it would have been available during the weekend, but not when the shooting had just taken place. So initially it was simply white supremacist mass shooting, and that was covered with great enthusiasm. And
Ooh, yeah. So he keeps saying that the mass media was really, really interested in the story when they thought it was white supremacist, but then they all changed when they found out that in fact it wasn't a white supremacist mass shooting. In fact, it was a Hispanic man, and the Hispanic man had been shot by a black cop. So this couldn't have, like, no. Like, as more information about the story came out, the narrative continued to reinforce the idea that this was in fact a white supremacist neo-Nazi mass shooter. And yeah, I mean, the social media platform, fucking the endless paper trail, like once that got exposed, it was like, holy fuck, is this person ever into this shit?
then the day after, as I believe your recollection is correct, Hispanic male, it wasn't covered.
He had a swastika tattoo.
Covered.
Well,
Yeah,
let's-
fucking swastika,
let's walk through the
a
chronology.
giant
All right, we have
swastika
shooting on May
tattoo.
6th. And on May 6th,
Like-
we don't know anything about the shooter. There's no information on who the shooter was.
It's just like straight up like that cartoon, you know, the one where like it's really hard to tell whether or not this person is in fact a fascist. It's really hard to tell whether or not this person's like a neo-Nazi, and they're literally dressed like Hitler doing Zig Heils, and you're like, yeah, how are we really going to tell though? You know, is he doing the Roman salute? Is he actually simply doing an emphatic hand gesture in a moment of excitement? We can't tell these days.
Identity, his motivations, anything. You agree with that?
I don't know if that's correct, and I don't know that the media was covering it that way. I believe they were covering it as a white supremacist immediately.
I think if you go back and you look at these events, what you're going to find happen is that the New York Times published from law enforcement sources saying that Mauricio Garcia had social media that had neo-Nazi ideation, he had tattoos, and that they were looking at a social media site, right? That's where all this comes from, right? This New York Times report. And on that day, as that's being reported, it's being reported that the guy's name is Mauricio Garcia. So what I'm trying to understand is what new information came to light that you say made the media change the narrative of its story.
I would imagine that it's a Hispanic male being labeled a white supremacist, and that was why they didn't cover it nearly as extensively.
Let me just make sure I have you correct. Do you think that the media was saying, that mainstream media outlets were saying that the shooter was a white supremacist shooter, and they did that without saying that he was Hispanic or giving his name?
I believe that they were reporting, my recollection is reporting he was a white supremacist, and as it was circulating, this was a Hispanic male. The story was not being covered with the same zeal. Yeah.
No, again, I'm going back to the idea of, do you believe?
Again, the same racist zeal that Steven Crowder has. It's just like they weren't being fair and balanced. They weren't talking about how he was Hispanic. They weren't making fun of Hispanic people. They weren't doing the accent. All right.
That there were reports identifying the shooter as white supremacist that also did not include his name and include to his ethnic identity.
There could have been. I don't recall exactly. I'm going by your timeline.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But I do remember at that point in time, it was labeled the greatest domestic terrorist threat, white supremacy. And that was something in the media quite a bit. It was
Absolutely.
always something being covered.
Completely. I
Always
agree.
was.
I agree.
Yeah. It never changed.
You don't have
Still
any reason
is.
to dispute with me that the shooter's name was known on May 7th.
I don't have any reason to dispute.
You said that my client has a very Hispanic looking face. What does that mean?
It means exactly what I said.
Can you explain it to me? I'm confused as to what that means.
You're confused as to what a Hispanic person looks like?
Yeah, is there anybody Hispanic on this Zoom call right now?
Objection form.
Well, I see a lot of boxes.
You got some pictures in front of you. You got gallery view. Is there any Hispanics on the call right now?
Oh my god.
Not one that would jump out to me as a very clearly.
Okay, so to be clear, right now, testifying under oath during his deposition, Steven Crowder is asked, "Can you please tell me what you mean by very Hispanic looking?" And he's like, "Exactly what it fucking means." He's like, okay, is there anyone Hispanic perhaps in the Zoom call? Could you identify what you consider to be very Hispanic looking, Mr. Crowder? And he's like, oh, wait, you want me to play racist right now here live on the stream? Oh my, but I'm wearing my pants. You know what happens when I play racist.
Hispanic male face.
All right, so help me understand what that is, because there is a Hispanic on this call. What is a very Hispanic looking face?
Objection form.
In the context of white supremacist, people generally.
He actually had to have a motherfucking lawyer object to him to protect his ass during this shit. He had to sit in a fucking testimony and straight up be like, well, by Hispanic looking, well, I don't know if I should be asked on the spot right now to perform my are they ethnic test. I don't know. Objection. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Think of white people, and this was clearly a Hispanic male.
Are you saying that Hispanic people are not white? That's what you're saying.
Saying they aren't typically white supremacists.
Where'd you get that idea? That's what you believe, that Hispanic people aren't white. There are no white supremacist Hispanic people.
I didn't say no. I said typically.
Right. That means that that does exist. If you say yeah, typically, that comes with a but, doesn't it? But there are Hispanic white supremacists. Right?
If you say there are some.
I'm asking you. Did you know that?
I would imagine that people who are not particularly white don't make great white supremacists.
So let's
That wasn't a question.
first of all, it actually
was a
raises a very
statement.
interesting question. You know what a Chicano is?
I know the term Chicano, yes.
Okay. And I'm using that to mean an ethnic identity for Mexican Americans who have a non-Anglo self-image. Right? You've heard that term before, Chicano?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, but I'm using it to mean an ethnic identity for Mexican Americans who have a non-Anglo self-image.
Sure.
You've heard Chicano used that way, right?
I've heard the term Chicano, yes.
Not every Hispanic is a Chicano. You'd agree with that?
Of course.
And there are Hispanics, you understood, as of last year, you understood there are Hispanics who do have an Anglo self-image.
Sure. If you're
You may
talking,
not, what I'm saying is, you may not see them as white, but there are Hispanics who definitely see themselves as white.
Objection form.
you mean like from Spain, perhaps? Yeah.
No, I'm saying there's Mexicans.
Brazil.
No, I'm saying Mexican Americans. There are Mexican Americans who identify as white.
Objection form.
Okay.
Did you understand that?
I understand that.
Okay.
Did
And
you
so let me put
understand?
it this way. You understood when covering the shooting that the quote unquote whiteness of Hispanic people has been heavily culturally litigated over the past 60 years and up to the present day. That's something you understood.
I don't think he understands that.
I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
I'm trying
What
to
the
say.
Hispanic white litigated
No.
in the last 6 years?
He's trying to explain to him what racism is. Yes, no, I'm sorry. I think Steven Crowder is woefully uninformed on this topic. I think if you were trying to explain to him what whiteness is, the history of white supremacy, the history of like colonization, the North Atlantic slave trade, all that shit, oof, you would have to start at fucking ground zero, okay? Like it would take so long. So no, Steven Crowder has not explored these ideas. I'm sure like as soon as like he's already reached the extreme limits of his capacity to even understand the questions that he's being asked. Where the person's like, okay, so you understand what Nazi is? Yes. Okay. Do you agree Nazi bad? I don't know if I understand the question. All right, fine. So you know what a Nazi is. You know what a white person is. Yes, I know what a white person is. Oh, okay. Did you agree that every white person is not a Nazi? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I agree with that. Not every single white person is a Nazi. Okay, good. Okay, we're getting somewhere. But then do you agree that some Hispanic people can be Nazis? Whoa. What did you do there? Non-white people can also be white, like supremacist extremists, or try to do violence in the name of white supremacy, that thing. Whoa, no, I don't know what you're saying anymore. Now it sounds like made up nonsense, fairy tales.
I just want to understand.
Yeah, culturally litigated. In other words, that they're let me put it this way. I take it you like in your life you've known some Hispanic people, and some of them might have names like Robert, and some of them might have names like Roberto. You understand what I mean?
Very well.
Right, and you understand what I mean by assimilationism. That there is.
I was like, I love how he's explaining this to him. I wonder if we're actually making like any walls are being shattered right now. I think he's just trying desperately just not to like, incriminate himself any further. But like you have to actually be like, okay, so do you understand how these are all kind of social constructs? Like, have you ever thought about this? Have you ever actually sat down and explored any of these ideas? It's pretty interesting, isn't it? How some people, they might have very fair skin. They could have a very multiracial background or ethnic makeup, but they could have very low amounts of melanin, which makes them look white, and they could identify as white. They could even have white sounding names. But then you agree too that people who have those same complexions could also have very non-white sounding names. And then all of a sudden the very idea of what exactly characterizes them or categorizes them as white people, that comes into question, and making it very, very difficult perhaps to identify what exactly is, say, a white supremacist, what exactly is, say, a neo-Nazi, what exactly, no, now you've lost them again.
A part of Hispanic culture that has attempted to be assimilationist, right, and adopt into white American culture. You know that exists.
I understand that it exists with certain.
You understand that there is also another separate part of Hispanic culture, which is non-assimilationist, which rejects an Anglo self-identity, right?
Sure.
And you understand that some people who are Hispanic identify as white, whereas other people in our culture do not consider them white. You understand that?
Are you saying that some people identify as white and other people don't identify? Yes.
Consider
Yes,
them
that's true. Yes, I understand. Well, I understand white supremacy very well, that they would not include any of the aforementioned groups amongst them.
Right.
They would not allow it, which is why it's a repugnant ideology.
Right. So what I'm saying is, you already knew when broadcasting the show that not only do some Hispanics identify as white. Let's go back. When I talk about like cultural litigation, for instance, the real shooter. Let's talk about the real 33-year-old Mauricio Garcia who committed this crime. Right. That person very well might consider themselves white, or considered before their death, but you didn't consider them white, correct?
Objection form.
Would I consider a Hispanic-looking male white? No, I would consider him a Hispanic male.
Looking.
Do you know what the
male.
real shooter looks like?
What the real shooter looks like? It is my understanding that he's a Hispanic male.
Well, I'm asking you, does he have a very Hispanic-looking face?
Objection form.
To the best of my recollection, he looks Hispanic, yes.
Okay.
As you would put it.
You understood when doing your broadcast that not only do some Hispanics identify as white, some identify as neo-Nazis and white supremacists. You knew that, right?
No.
You didn't know that. That was new information to you.
I believe if you watch the show, it was comical information.
But it turns out to be
You
true.
found it funny that a Hispanic person, in an attempt to litigate their own whiteness, might associate with white supremacy and white supremacist ideas. You thought that was funny.
I find it comical that someone who would not be accepted amongst racist white supremacists in any way, shape, or form would identify with them.
You really in touch with how racist white supremacists might view certain people? Is that something you know a lot about?
Objection form.
Are you asking me personally?
Yeah. Like, I don't know how you look. I know there are Hispanic white supremacists. That's a thing that exists, right? I know that. I know there are neo-Nazi white supremacists who have Hispanic backgrounds, right? And I think what you're saying is that that's actually not possible because no white supremacist would ever associate.
Objection form.
So I guess what I'm getting at is
you're correct. As a general rule, white supremacists tend to be quite racist.
right. I get that. And Hispanic white supremacists also tend to be quite racist, don't they?
Objection form.
I know that Hispanic people can be racist as anyone can be racist.
I'm asking you specifically though about Hispanic white supremacists. They can be very, very racist, right?
Objection form.
I would imagine if a Hispanic person identifies as a white supremacist,
Yeah, Nick
they would be
Fuentes does
quite
come to
racist.
mind.
I think we can agree there.
Ooh, it took him a long time to get there.
No, I think as we've established, not every Hispanic
Like an hour and a
is
half.
visibly clockable as being Hispanic. Would you agree with that?
Sure.
And Hispanic being a big, you understand that there are a lot of different backgrounds that a person could have that would make them Hispanic.
Absolutely. Or Latino.
For instance, Ted Cruz, he's Hispanic, but he's also Canadian like you, right?
True.
Well, I'm American, but
Oh, I thought you were Canadian.
I was raised in Canada, but I was born in Michigan.
Oh, he identifies as an American now.
No, my dad's American.
Oh, are they too?
My
Okay.
dad's American. My grandparents are American.
So you were just a temporary expat then, basically.
My mom's French Canadian, and we lived there for a while, so I automatically get a citizenship when my mother's French Canadian.
I gotta say,
I don't know.
this is a good day. Hey, Canadians, we just got a huge victory. Steven Crowder does not identify as a Canadian. It's official today. What is it? January 29th? We did it. January 29th, 2025. Yeah, America, you got him. You got to take your boy. Keep your boy, I should say. Yeah, keep your boy. There you go. He's yours now. Woo! Things just got lighter. Oh, this country. I mean, I feel it was like a +1 collectively. We as a nation, just all of a sudden, whoop, and then like all of you Americans, you just debuffed. It's a good day. It's a good day, I gotta say.
Banker baby would be appropriate.
No, yeah, it sounds more like you just maybe have
no take backsies.
Dual background there. You got on both sides of the border.
Sure.
The
Northern side. Yeah. We're talking about Hispanic. They exist in Canada too.
That's true. That's true. So I think one of the things we can get to is that it's impossible to paint the entire Hispanic community with a broad brush in terms of you can look at them and identify them as Hispanic, right?
Correct, which is why I issued the qualifier of a very Hispanic looking person.
Right. So when you saw my client's photo in his very Hispanic looking face, you thought you could use that on your show to show that the media was lying, right?
The idea, again, there's lying and there's a narrative. There's a difference that white supremacists, people obviously, whether you can litigate it here, that are culturally litigated, people have an image in mind when they think of white supremacist, and it's generally not Hispanic looking people.
It's generally not Chicanos, right?
Objection form.
I said it's generally not Hispanic looking people to the American.
Right. But I think what we're getting at, like, look, you look at a picture of my client, right? And he's got the Gothic script tattoo of his girlfriend on his neck. He's got the lowrider haircut, the Edgar haircut, right?
What basically, and I think he's been getting him to basically admit in the form of testimony for a while now, is that you do racial profiling. You might not realize it. I mean, you don't have to get him to start explaining like ideas like, you know, unconscious bias or anything like that, but you do racial profiling, Stephen. You do it on your show. The fact that you do so much racial profiling is how something like this got to like the degree that it did, where you're posting the photo of a man who did no crime. He did not commit a crime. You are associating him with a fucking mass shooter. You're posting his photo and saying this is a violent, deranged individual who has killed killed dozens of people and will kill more right now because he is a violent Hitlerite Nazi extreme. And then it's like, no, you just mixed up two folk. That's really bad. But now you're doing this thing where you heard that they were Hispanic. You wanted to spread a narrative that it couldn't have been a white supremacist neo-Nazi because, of course, it wasn't a white person. That doesn't make any sense. And then you had seen that photo circulating on right-wing circles. Unfortunately, it got as far as Newsmax. Even Newsmax did it. They had to issue a correction, I guess. Might be a little FTC problem there. But they issued a correction. But Steven, he's got an internet show. He just does whatever the fuck he wants unless someone sues him.
You can look at my client and you can know this is a guy who identifies with his Mexican roots. You think that's pretty clear from looking at him?
Objection form.
If I were asked if he looked Hispanic, I would answer yes.
Right.
Glad we're getting the
doesn't
raw
really
testimony
look
of
like
him being a
Hispanic
racist.
who would be a white supremacist, does he?
Objection form.
Well, any Hispanic, again, is difficult to reconcile in the United States as a white supremacist, given how white supremacists view Hispanics.
Again, maybe for you, right? But we know there are neo-Nazi Hispanics. We know that there are white supremacist Hispanics, but they don't tend to look like my client, do they?
Objection form.
I don't know.
Okay. But as far as about, you remember we looked at earlier, we saw about how the idea here was you had information on the shooting and you were going to show the lies of the mainstream media. But when it comes to the identity of the shooter, you were incorrect about that. The media wasn't lying, right?
All the other information was correct, as you listed, as far as the age, the name, person, and yeah, the image was incorrectly sourced from other reporters before us. Which is
I'm not talking about what you did. I'm talking about when it comes to the shooter's identity. The media didn't lie. The mainstream media outlets that you identified, they didn't lie.
Well,
Objection form.
Right?
I believe they were misleading. Yeah.
In what way were they misleading?
In saying white supremacist and then abandoning the story once they realized that the person was Hispanic. Even if you may say so, but the media decided that it wasn't a story they wanted to cover as much.
All right.
Because the media has an idea of what a white supremacist looks like, I would imagine.
The media.
Right. Well, I want to. Right. And he didn't look like my client, did he?
Objection form.
A white supremacist wouldn't look like someone who looks Hispanic.
Right. I'm talking about the actual shooter. And I know that you're hesitant to call him a neo-Nazi shooter, but I'm going to call a chair. He's a neo-Nazi shooter. And that neo-Nazi.
Yeah,
he doesn't look like my client.
Objection form.
Mauricio Garcia, the neo-Nazi shooter?
Right. Doesn't look like my client.
I don't recall how much they look alike.
Okay.
Again, it's a little confusing because there's two Mauricio Garcias.
I killed so many
Right.
Nazis
The media
in a
was
row.
accurate that the shooter was Mauricio Garcia. The mainstream media outlets that you cited, they were accurate about that, right?
Yes,
They were accurate that he was 33 years old.
that's my understanding.
They were accurate that he had multiple neo-Nazi tattoos on his body.
That's my understanding.
They were right that he had a vest that was for right-wing death squad. Correct?
I don't recall that, but if you say so.
They were correct that he had a social media presence where he expressed neo-Nazi views.
I don't recall that, but if you say so.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out what they might have said about the shooter's identity, if anything, that was bullshit.
Yeah, well, the presentation, as you said, the shooting happened, I believe, on the 6th.
Mhm.
And the 7th. That's when the information came out. It's my understanding that the media was running with the narrative of white supremacists before the 7th. And certainly running with the narrative that white supremacy is the greatest domestic terror threat in the United States. And certainly pushing the narrative of gun control.
Which
so
it
the
is.
bullshit
That's just
there
being
is because a
factually
black
accurate.
Officer, who, if my recollection is correct, was either off duty or responding to a call at chance, shot the man with his own.
Only white supremacists
Same
who
media
wanted
said we need
to like
control for that
ignore
message.
the reality
That has-
of the vast majority
that has
of
nothing to do
domestic
with who the
terrorism
shooter
is
was.
by white
You
supremacists.
asked what the media was
Because they
presenting.
want to
I
protect
believe
white
was
supremacists
bullshit.
would talk like
Actually,
this.
what I asked
Or try
you
to frame things
when it
like
comes
this.
to the reporting on the
It's the
shooter's
only reason
identity,
you would do that.
and you said who the shooter was, a lot of what the media is telling you is bullshit. What were they telling you that was bullshit about who the shooter was?
Objection form.
Again, you showed a brief clip. I believe the entire show was devoted to the narrative and clips from the media and what they were presenting and why it was misleading. As far as the shooter on the 7th, if the articles that you bring up are accurate, then it seems they got the name and age correct.
I mean, they got everything correct, right? What didn't they get correct?
Again, they were misleading in the other information surrounding it.
About who the shooter was?
You asked me what I believe was bullshit from the media.
Again, I'm going to tell you again, what I'm asking you is when you said who the shooter was, a lot of what the media is telling you is bullshit. When it comes to who the shooter was, there was nothing that was bullshit, was there?
I don't know about their, again, initial reporting, which would have been the 6th. And that's what people believe, right? If something is front page center news, and we know this how the media works, front page center news, white supremacists without that information, a narrative, gun control before the body is assumed room temperature, the information comes out the next day.
It's all about protecting the guns.
People don't read to the same
Not
degree.
protecting people from white
still believe the frequency
supremacists or
goes
mass
from
shooters.
When the media was initially
We got to
reported.
protect the guns.
But okay, let's go ahead and assume for me. I'm going to go ahead and
The guns
let me tell you,
and
this ain't real.
and
but I'm
white
gonna tell you
people's
that I'm not-
dignity.
I'm pretty up to speed on the media coverage.
The
But let's
shooter
just
made
go ahead
white
and
people
assume
look
that your
bad.
understanding of
Oh
it
wait,
is
he wasn't white.
that
Okay, it's
on
fine.
May 7th, the media
He didn't make
reported
Hispanic
he was a
people
white
look bad.
supremacist.
He
And that was the
he
only
didn't
fact
do
they
that.
reported. They didn't report that his name was Mauricio Garcia or that he was Hispanic. All right. Assume for me that happened. It didn't.
Or May 6th, yeah.
Or May 6th. Right. Good. I can tell you the shooter's name was not known on May 6th. There was no information about
No,
it.
not the shooter, but the idea of a white supremacist shooter, yes.
Right. Not that either. Right. None of that even happened. Right. But go ahead and assume for me that it did. Go ahead and assume for me that the media reported that the shooter had white supremacist leanings. That's not bullshit. Right. That's 100% accurate.
If they reported that he had white supremacist leanings,
Mhm.
Mauricio Garcia on the 7th, sure.
Right. So again, about the shooter's identity, about who he was, there's nothing they said was bullshit. Right.
Yep.
I disagree. As it relates to the story at large, I disagree. I think a very
Specify.
Not asking you about. I know that we've been talking about this idea that there was a gun control narrative and that there was a cop who shot him. So therefore that invalidates gun control in some way because there was a cop with a gun. So, I mean, I'm not sure who's trying to regulate cops having guns. That ties in. I get that that's a whole separate discussion. Right? But what I'm saying is in terms of the media's identity of the shooter, the
I
details
am.
that it reported about who the shooter was
Yes.
and what his background
I don't
was,
have
what his
institutional
belief
power
systems
in the
were.
US,
None
though.
of that was bullshit. It never was.
But I would like to regulate that, yes. I would like them to have less weaponry.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true.
All right, so again, trying to focus down so you can tell me, because this is my chance to get that.
I was just thrown because he said you didn't know anyone who was trying to regulate cops with guns and it was an off-duty officer with an AR-15. I find that difficult to believe that you are not aware of that. So I thought this was taking place in good faith.
No, like, wait, so no, and I am unaware, but are you saying that there's
It's a
some sort of legislation in the works to make it so that off-duty officers don't
His
have
faith
access
is
to their weapons when they're
immaterial
off
to
duty or
what's
something
happening
like
right now.
Objection form.
He's the
that? Yeah, I'm being
lawyer.
serious, man. I don't know about you.
Is this conversation occurring in good faith? You're giving a deposition, sir. This is
No, I
part of
don't
the
believe it.
trial.
And of course, whether you're on duty or off duty, those weapons, yeah, we're being
He doesn't have to be good at
weapons that
anything.
should be a part of gun control, which was used to stop the
He's questioning
Hispanic shooter who was presented as white supremacist. There were important components to the story. And I believe the media was being misleading about that.
YouTuber brain.
Extremely
You got
fascinating
fucking
line of
content
inquiry that we
brain.
could get into on all these issues that if we were in any other situation, I would love to talk to you about the vagaries of gun control and all of that, but not terribly relevant to what I want to ask you about today. Right. And so what I'm really focusing in on is the idea of the shooter's identity, the details of the shooter's identity, his belief systems, his backgrounds, everything about who he is.
Right.
I believe you told me that when I said that none of that was bullshit, you said you didn't agree with that. And I'm trying to figure out, because it's my chance to ask you questions today, is if you can tell me what the mainstream media organizations that you cited got wrong about the shooter's identity, background, and belief systems.
Hard questions.
Objection form.
And my answer is that those are not mere vagaries when they were the primary driving narrative of the story. That's why the story was
Mere
being covered.
vagaries.
And that's why the other information there was correct. And there was a mistake on the images we've already discussed. But I don't believe that those were vagaries. Gun control, white supremacy, black officer who's a hero. I believe those are very relevant and they were being bypassed by and large by the media. That was the reason for the story.
I agree that white supremacy is a key element to what we're talking about. I'm not sure that gun control is, but we'll just disagree. We'll agree to disagree on it. But what I'm asking you, and again, I'm just trying to get a straight answer to this to know if there is or there isn't. Was there anything that the mainstream media said about the shooter's identity, who he was, his background or belief system, that was bullshit?
Objection form.
I don't recall beyond the examples that I've given you.
And
And it is
what
my
examples of
recollection
again,
it is my recollection that on May 6th, they were already labeling it another white supremacist massacre. Before
let's say they were. Let's say they were. They weren't, but let's say they were. That's not wrong. That's not bullshit. Right?
Correct.
Disagree.
Let's get back to that issue of, I think this gets back to the idea of you're hesitant to call this person a neo-Nazi mass shooter.
Yeah,
Right?
he
Remember us
still
talking
is.
about that?
I do.
I've never seen anyone
So it's
more
not enough that he has
terrified of it.
neo-Nazi tattoos. It's not enough that he had a social media
That's
presence
the
that
other
had
thing.
neo-Nazi beliefs.
Look the fucking gymnastics here. I would have given up after one question. If someone's like, hey, by the way, I don't know if that guy you're talking about, Lance, is a neo-Nazi. You don't know if he's a neo-Nazi. Yeah, well, why don't we check this out? Oh, he's got a swastika tattoo on his chest, a giant one. Yep. There's not really ever been, I would say, a neo-Nazi in history who has done that just, you know, for jokes, for funsies. It's impossible just not to go around everyday life with a giant swastika on your chest and not have every single person you encounter think you're a neo-Nazi. So that's just going to be a thing that you deal with forever. So you would only do that if you're a neo-Nazi who wants to be identified forever as a neo-Nazi everywhere they go. Otherwise, what are we doing here? Like, are you serious? Are you gonna, is he gonna defend that
For
too?
you to be able to call somebody a neo-Nazi.
Objection form.
Probably someone being in an official neo-Nazi organization and typically white, as far as presenting it to the public in relation to the threat that was presented. White.
He said it. There, white. Has to be a white person. Only a white person. Yes. Aren't these same white supremacists the ones we always hear? Like, well, actually, white people weren't the only people who enslaved other people. Did you know that? Yes. Sorry, what's your point? Does that invalidate? No, slavery is always bad. What, do all slave masters matter? Is that what you're trying to do here? I'm confused, sir. Well, in this case, it's like I need the racist to be white. Only white people can be the racists, you see? Yeah. Are you doing white supremacy for racism? Are you trying to take that back? No other group of people can be as racist as the whites. Only the whites can be the most racist.
Domestic terrorism is the term that was used. So white neo-Nazi would be relevant to domestic terrorism, which I also disagree with.
All right, so to be a neo-Nazi, you have to be white and you have to be a member of a neo-Nazi organization.
Objection
Anything
form.
else?
Objection form.
In general, that would be a good start.
That's true, even though, as we just discussed,
A
there
good
are
start.
Hispanic neo-Nazis.
I don't think he wants to.
In general, yes.
Let me bring up, I want to talk to you a little bit about the series of videos you did on this. Let's bring up tab 5.
Nice. I love evidence being presented. Oh, sorry, I got
Mark just said we're renaming this 4.
Oh, that's right. This is tab 4, and we'll offer this as exhibit 4. Now, this is, I was directed to a page that I know you don't operate, or let me make sure, let's get that on the record first. We have a page here that's mgtow.tv. You see that?
Yes, I see it in the corner there.
Okay. You familiar with that abbreviation?
I'm not, no.
You ever heard of men going their own way?
No.
It's like an incel thing. I'm not sure if you know what incel is.
I'm familiar with the term incel.
Okay. This is men who are anti-feminist and separatist and that sort of thing. But I noticed that there is a Steven Crowder account on this website. Does that have anything to do with your company or you?
No.
Objection form.
Okay. You understand, as we were talking earlier, that people republish your stuff on the internet all the time.
Of course I can.
Yeah. And in fact, it's not actually the worst thing in the world for you because that might direct people to your website to buy your stuff, things like that. There's some benefit to you from that. You would agree?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Now on your YouTube page.
Well, I mean, this is a really good point because he's pulling up something that isn't directly, I guess, associated with Steven Crowder. MGTOW.tv. So basically, incel television. Something that I assume, by the way, parents, if you've got kids, you're walking by the browser, you see them and they're happy, they're into things, say like MGTOW TV or Cozy TV. Those are not as wholesome as they sound. They're horrifying corners of the internet filled with Nazis and incels. There's a big overlap between the two communities where it becomes misogyny and white supremacy. Ooh, those worlds love each other. They love overlapping with each other. It's very dangerous. But say if you were a content producer, if you make things, and that was what your like data 9 to 5 kind of thing was, and you were Steven Crowder, for example, wouldn't you get upset if you just came across someone who had stolen the totality of your content or a large section of it? Because, I mean, you're not, unless you're okay with it, or you're okay with them licensing it, or you're okay with a bunch of incels and Nazis basically stealing your stuff, unless you guys are aligned. Which, again, that would be an interesting like line of questioning, right? You know, suddenly be like, so are you going to be suing these people who have either been stealing all your content or using it or replicating it? Or is it a problem here? There's another one called, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to be putting that on the screen. Yeah. So that's a real thing. Hey, by the way, to people who were asking about the game, yeah, totally unrelated to that. That's just me also trying to stimulate you visually while Steven Crowder is taking forever to answer questions. We're watching this on 1.5. I didn't think I'd watch as much of it as that we have, though, but a lot of it has been glorious and important because at the end of the day, there's been a long-standing pipeline from the Steven Crowders all the way on down to obviously, you know, your modern-day neo-Nazi shooters. Even if those neo-Nazi shooters happen to not be white, which again, white supremacist or white supremacist ideology, it can indoctrinate anyone, and there are people who will want to be collaborators along the way to try and uphold it, thinking that they themselves can be protected in the process. It's the same reason you get so many like pick-me's and tokens in the LGBTQ plus community, where you'll see gay people, gay men like Dave Rubin, just like openly debase themselves on a regular basis in front of the worst, like, you know, horrifying people who want to restrict the rights of all LGBTQ plus people, but they feel safe if they are just simply standing behind Dennis Prager, right? If he's like, yeah, they won't come for me, I'll be the last on the trains. Like, it's not going to be true, though. Like, at the end of the day, when it comes to neo-Nazi and white supremacist movements, things are going so fast now. That's why you have people like even Steve Bannon, who are like, there's a large percentage, especially of like, you know, the followers of Elon and the overlap with the incels and the MGTOW people, all of these fucks, they're getting way too fucking neo-Nazi. They just want to eliminate all the races, Ubermensch style shit, and they're fucking with our bag, because ultimately we want more of like the authoritarian nationalists. That's the idea that we're going for on our end. They're going on the whole like, we are the master race, we have to purge the unclean kind of shit. So, and it's just, it's too much. And now, yes, that cringe ass dork Elon Musk is doing double fucking Nazi salutes and all that kind of stuff. This is a really important moment, I think, to have someone like Steven Crowder, who, yeah, he's fading, but he's basically been one of the long-running fucking assholes who's been a part of this human centipede for a while now, and normalizing it all the time. Like, maybe now it's more, you know, Tim Pool's and Charlie Kirk's are the normalizers of the extremists, but when someone commits, like, you know, a mass shooting, when someone kills a bunch of people, if they're going to downplay the neo-Nazi connection, if they're going to frequently be like, they want to tell you he's a neo-Nazi because of what, a swastika tattoo, an SS tattoo, basically the collective manifesto and writings that he had, the beliefs that he espoused, the actions that he did in the name of, again, neo-Nazism and white supremacy. Sure, you can go all in that direction and get messy and shit, but does that mean he's actually a true believer? I mean, at the end of the day, he wasn't white. If he's not white, he can't do the flight. It rhymes, right?
I'd rather people not rip and upload our content.
Okay. On your YouTube page now, the videos, if you'll see here in the top middle, there's videos that have pictures of my client. You see what I'm referring to?
Yes.
Those videos no longer exist on the Steven Crowder YouTube or Rumble pages, right?
Uh-oh.
Objection form.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
And so part of the reason I'm showing you this is because here we have the two episodes that you had done on it in order, right? I think what you'll agree with me is that if you look at the top two middle videos, those are actually the same video. You agree? That's what it looks like?
Those are the same video?
That's what it looks like to me. I haven't watched every minute of it, but they have basically the same time, same title, very similar thumbnail. I'm assuming that's the same episode. You didn't do two episodes about my client, right?
I couldn't answer my first time seeing it. One looks like a different time code from the other, actually.
Yeah.
125.10, 125.21. So I don't know. Again, I'm not familiar with this channel.
Yeah. Okay. But we do know that the next day we see at the top left, it also has your next day episode, right? This one that was entitled "Are Intelligence Agencies Involved in the Texas Mass Shooting?" You see that?
I see what you're showing me, yes.
Okay. So in the middle picture videos, we see that those episodes were the ones in which, or episode was the one in which you used an image of my client as the shooter, right?
It would appear so.
Now the episode the next day, what you're showing there, that's a picture of the real shooter there with his Nazi tattoos, right?
To the best of my recollection.
All right. And once it became clear to you that there was images out there of this person with neo-Nazi tattoos, your next report was to say that intelligence agencies might be involved in this shooting, right?
Objection 4.
Wow.
I don't recall.
Have you watched the May 9th show recently, like in preparation for this deposition?
No, I haven't watched it.
Okay. Would you disagree with me that once all this came out about the shooter's pictures of the shooter's actual body, that once that happened, you started suggesting that this incident was some sort of psyop or psychological operation?
Objection 4.
I don't believe that I don't recall referring to it as a psyop.
Okay. You have any idea why you thought intelligence agencies might be involved? Is that something you thought?
I don't recall, but it wouldn't be surprising.
Explain that to me. It wouldn't be surprising for U.S. intelligence agencies to be involved in this neo-Nazi mass shooting. That's not surprising.
I would imagine that intelligence agencies would be involved with any type of mass shooting that would require the use of intelligence.
Wait, you're meaning that what you're saying right now is you think intelligence agencies would be involved after the fact in some way, like investigating it?
They
Objection
could
4.
be.
That's not what this show is about, right? You understand that.
I don't recall. Is it something like the Hunter Biden laptop story?
I don't think so.
The FBI reaching out to big tech, telling them it was Russian discernment? Because I know we've talked about those where I don't remember this one though.
Let me see if I can refresh your memory. You know what Bellingcat is, right?
Beg your pardon?
You know what Bellingcat? You know what that is?
Bedlam cat?
Bellingcat.
Bellingcat.
BEOING cat?
Let me try it this way. You know somebody discovered the social media profile of the shooter. You know that how?
Not to mention, like, I bet you could find like 20 different clips. I mean, maybe he's already got them where it's obviously Steven Crowder watching Bellingcat being like, yeah, now the liberal cucks here at Bellingcat. And you're like, oh yes, you know what they are, right? You said it here in this clip.
I don't recall.
Do you know where you got that picture of the swastika and the SS bolts?
Objection 4.
I don't recall where the staff would have gotten that picture.
Does the name Arik Toller, a researcher from Bellingcat, does that ring a bell to you?
I don't recall.
Oh, okay. Do you remember on this May 9th show that you said there was some confusion over which was the real photo of the shooter?
I vaguely recall, I believe Gerald saying that, and I believe that was mentioned.
All right, let's make it clear. You have never told your audience that you showed an incorrect picture on your show.
Objection 4.
Again, I don't recall. What you're saying sounds correct, that someone said there was confusion about the image.
Right, but you know, one of the things that when I first reached out to you on behalf of my client that I asked, could you make a retraction and tell your audience that that was false? And you've never done that, have you?
I don't believe I've ever communicated with you before today.
Well, I've certainly written you a letter.
I don't believe we've ever communicated, you and I, before today.
Huh, that's interesting. So
Have you
yeah,
spoken before today?
we've never spoken, no.
Have
No,
we emailed?
this whole odyssey began when I wrote a letter on May 22nd, 2023, addressed to you and your company that first informed you of all of this and then asked you to make a correction. Are you aware of that?
Objection 4.
I'm just trying to, so you're saying that I responded to you directly?
I don't think you ever did. No, I don't think you ever responded to me.
Okay.
Objection 4.
So I don't believe you and I have ever communicated before today.
Well, I mean, I would say sending you a letter makes it a communication. I would say that, yes. So what I'm asking you
I
is,
don't recall ever myself reading a letter from you. I don't.
and so, in other words, not making a retraction, was that an intentional choice on your part?
Objection 4.
No, because I don't recall anything you're discussing. You sending me a letter. I don't recall that letter or that request being made from you. The only thing I recall is, again, my staff saying there was some confusion and that being addressed on the show.
Right. And part of that show was, in fact, to express your doubts that these images of the shooter with neo-Nazi tattoos were real, right?
I don't recall.
Okay. You understand that your incorrect coverage of the Allen shooting, it can really mess up people's sense of reality. You get that?
Objection 4.
No.
All right. What can? When it comes to the decision to show this
No.
photo, You believe you did anything wrong to our client, Mauricio Garcia, who had nothing to do with this?
I do believe that reporting on the image, which was incorrect, was wrong. Yeah, that was a mistake.
And you understand that calling someone, identifying someone as a neo-Nazi mass murderer when they're not, is a damaging thing to do to them.
Objection form.
Yeah.
Referring to someone who's clearly dead, known nationally, who was a white supremacist shooter, if it existed in a vacuum, sure, just accusing someone of being a neo-Nazi.
Pretty bad.
Okay.
When you
in
have a massive
deciding to
platform,
show
pretty
my client's
damaging, I would
photo,
say.
you did not act as carefully as you should have, right?
I really wonder how much Tim Pool settled.
I don't know the process that
Tim Pool
takes place
settled
in
out of
staff
court
before it
for
got to me,
this.
but no, there was a mistake made there.
Well,
And we do our best to, that's why the references are only publicly available, because mistakes are often made. You have an admonish button on the show for when mistakes are made live. It's a very important component of the show.
I'm not sure if I know, though, whether you believe, whether you acted as carefully as you should have.
Oh, nice.
No, I told you
As
the
much as
mistake,
Nazis
the
exploded.
mistake was made. It was the wrong
So,
image. That's a mistake.
yes. That's yes, you did not act as carefully as you should have.
Did I kill Hitler in the video
staff
game?
And whatever processes took place
Or
were not
to tell
performed
who that
correctly,
was?
and a mistake was made.
And you're responsible for making sure those processes are in place. It's your business, right?
Objection form.
I do my best. It's a company of around 30-something people. So,
Are you saying that like it's a big company?
no, I'm saying that I can't be doing every job at all times. And we have practices or methods of approaching stories
Cool.
that usually do a very good job
Too many
actually,
Nazis.
as far as the track record. And if they don't, the references are publicly available as a failsafe because we believe in transparency. And mistakes definitely can be made. And in this case, the mistake was definitely made.
And you are the one
Is this a
responsible
gaming
for creating.
stream? Well,
an
no,
important-
I'm half watching the testimony. It's a long testimony. I mean, he's been giving over almost 2 hours worth of deposition here, and we did miss a little bit at the beginning. But there's a lot of very important parts. You just have to get through it all to be able to know everything he's talking about. I'm also just completely unrelated playing Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, a game about neo-Nazis in an alternate timeline who took over America. Good thing that'll never happen though, because we'll stop them. But they're completely unrelated. It's not in any way, by the way, trying to like do things that I can already see people trying to clip all of this out of context and associate the two things together. Shame on all of you. Shame on all of you, okay? I'm tired of that. You can enjoy video games. You can enjoy old school video games or even new school video games. I mean, the original Wolfenstein is pretty old, and then there was Wolfenstein's Castle, and Wolfenstein 3D was fun. They're all great games, classics, where yes, you kill Nazis, and just like a lot of classic cinema, and even modern cinema, actually, it's about killing Nazis. Nazis are usually terrible people, but to modern people who have these terrible like ideologies, they can stop being Nazis. They can at any time stop being Nazis, whereas again, gay people can't stop being gay. So the Nazis, they have an exterminationist project. They want to get rid of people, and whereas like they could stop being Nazis. They could read a book. They could read a book. They could learn a little bit about the world around them, and then stop trying to fill the empty part of their hearts or souls with Nazi ideology, fascist ideology. It seems like that's basically been the guiding compass throughout all of this, But they're completely unrelated. They're
policies and requirements.
They
for
seem
your,
associated with one another.
For your talk show.
Objection form.
No.
I'm confused. If you don't think you have any responsibility to run your business in a way that has policies in place to safeguard and guard against false information?
That's not what I said.
Well, so you are responsible for doing those things, for making sure that those policies are in place.
You said enforcing the policies.
Right, I would hope so, right? I mean, well, actually, that's an interesting thing you bring up. Was anybody fired for this?
Objection form.
I don't recall. I know there are people who no longer work with the company who worked in that department. I don't recall.
No, not the ones you may have molested. We're talking about this. Totally
sitting here today,
unrelated.
do you think you took any disciplinary action against anybody for this?
Objection form. Are you asking Stephen or Louder with Crowder?
I would assume that he would have to do it. I mean,
Aren't they
he's
the
Crowder
same
with Louder with
person?
Crowder, right?
No, actually, I'm not in charge of hiring or terminating employees.
Okay, do you have
I am
policies in
not
place?
louder with Crowder.
Objection form.
I believe there are policies in place for that, as far as hiring and terminating.
Okay, and pursuant to those policies of your company, was anybody fired or terminated or disciplined in any way for this?
Again, I don't recall. I wouldn't have been the one terminating anybody.
All right, I remember you saying earlier that we take care to be as careful as possible. But here, you weren't careful as possible, were you?
Objection form.
Or at all.
It seems that there was a breakdown in the process or communications where a mistake was made. So
You did not, before you got on your show, before you showed this image to the world, you did not investigate the truth or falsity of the photo before you showed it.
Objection form.
incorrect.
Well, from what I understand, you relied on the fact that it had been reported by a source you found suitable, right? You did no independent investigation of the photo yourself.
Myself personally,
Right.
no. Members of the staff of the company were tasked with doing that obviously did so in error.
And you would agree that this photo should have been investigated more fully before it was put on the air.
I would agree with that being the case if not reporting on someone else's reporting and pointing out to people the source of the reporting. That is something that we have to do very often.
I want to make sure I get this, to make sure I understand this. It is your belief that if you have a media organization, Today News Africa, we'll call that a media organization for these purposes, right? If you have this media organization and you find them suitable, that is all the fact checking you need to do, and you can put the image that they say is a mass murderer on the air to your audience.
That's
Clean
pretty
up your
intense.
room.
Jamyeti22.
Okay. So what else has to happen before you can do it?
Before you can do what?
Before you can put that picture out to people.
Again, if it's,
Let me just start by, you got a website and it's saying, this is the shooter. No sourcing, just this is the shooter. And you got it on a website. And I guess you find that website suitable. Is that enough, or what else has to happen before you can put that out to people?
no, again, it was saying, according to this source, this is the shooter. And there were other, as I recall, other existing sources.
So there just has to be some other existing
Clean up
source.
your room.
Objection form.
I'm just trying to get them all. So what we have is,
That would be a minimum, that there would often have to be at least more than one place that is seen. It's not the only process.
so we have in an article, it's used in an article by someone purporting to be a media organization. And then if you see it somewhere else, then we're done. We can put it on the air. Nothing else needs to happen.
I didn't say nothing else needs to happen.
What else needs to happen?
Certainly, if this is something that is novel or new, you would have to cite the source and say, according to them, which is very important, especially when there's original reporting that's not your own, only to give credit. Sometimes they're investigative journalists who are the only sources of information that exist. And you have to give them credit and say, according to this person, because that's the information that you have available at the time.
I made it from
Now
YouTube
it's
finally.
available.
Nice.
Then make it
Welcome to
publicly
the other
available.
side.
So as long as you have a website that covers news that you find suitable, uses the image, and then you see it somewhere else, and as long as you say that you got it from the source you got it from, Today News Africa, that's all we need to do. Now we're done. We can put it on the air, right?
Objection.
Apparently.
Something
No,
else. What else needs to happen?
it depends on the story.
What needed to happen here?
I couldn't tell you what needed to happen here at that moment in time.
That's a shame, because that is literally what I came to ask you about. But, and I think that'll call it a day today. Thank you for your time, Mr. Crowder, and see you soon.
Wow. Quieter with Steven.
All right.
I don't have time to go through them, but on the same channel, by the way, because this is with Castor, Lynch, Farrar, and Ball, LLP, they have all of the fucking Crowder crew and some of the Alex Jones crew there, too. Yeah, his sidekick, and this is one of the dudes from Alex Jones, Alex Schroyer, had to give a testimony as well.
So let me just ask it again so we're clear.
Sure. Another category. I really don't know if Hispanics consider themselves to be white in some cases or not. I don't know.
Yeah, he's asking the same
Let's go to the
questions.
circumstances of the
Mr. Crowder, when you say they were, quote, Hispanic looking, what do you mean by that? I bet you already drink coffee and love coffee, but you're probably worried if your coffee has blood in it. Not literal blood, but conflict zone blood. Did you want to buy coffee that is not only going to be delicious, it's going to arrive right on your door, it helps a little bit fund the serfs, and also it's end-to-end indigenous owned. That's why I partnered with Solstice Coffee, and hey, if you order by going to serfscoffee.com, they even include a free sticker, which is pretty awesome. So there's really no reason to actually not replace the coffee you already drink with delicious ethical coffee. That's why you should check out serfscoffee.com.
Hey, if you'd like to unlock secret bonus episodes as well as uncensored content, go to patreon.com/theserfs. This show is produced by Anna Loves Riley, Arian McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Jimmy Sombrero, Multimondi, Omni, Political Puppy, Preston Kroll, Quiet 185, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demel, Travis McClinton, Trincel, Words Greenwood, with additional support coming from all of these amazing human beings right here.